Welcome to the Dirtbag State of Mind podcast from the Climbing Zine. I am Luke Mihal, and this is our season opener for Season 7, The Art of The Belaytionship with Andy Vo. Always exciting to be starting another season, and my message here at the top is a message of gratefulness for the community that surrounds the podcast and that people listen to it. I know I've said this on the podcast before, but it really is my favorite part of my job when I get to have one of these intentional, interesting conversations like the one we're about to play here. I want to say I'm grateful for you all for listening and for supporting, those of you who support on Patreon or those of you who subscribe to the Climbing Zine. Super grateful for you all. And just wanted to give a big shout out here at the top as well to everyone I've shared a rope with this climbing season here in El Potrero Chico. It's really been an incredible season, and I just turned 46 after this last season ended. My journey in climbing, I feel like it's really been a new era in my climbing in these last few years, and one thing I've had to really be open to is meeting new partners and having new adventures, as some of the partners I've had in the past are available less, or when you're just in a new place, you just need to find new people. So really coincidental as well that Andy is definitely one of my new great partners. We met at the Climbers Festival years ago and then finally tied in here in Potrero, and then we've been projecting together for about the last month, and it's been really great. And yeah, big thanks to Andy for doing this episode. It is a huge focus on belaying. Of course, not just belaying. It's not just it's not really technical at all, but it's just kind of about the interpersonal relationship that we have with our climber as a belayer. It was really sparked by Andy's thoughtfulness as a belayer, and something I say here in the beginning is when we first met, day one, he's like, I'm trying to be as good of a belayer as I am a climber. This episode is sponsored by Kilter. Looking for a fun way to train at home or at the gym? Check out the Kilter board. Kilter board has innovative light-up holds, a progressive app, and animated functions with climbs for all abilities, and 2 layouts to choose from with large online communities for each. There are over 160,000 problems in the original Kilter board layout, and the largest full ride home wall layout comes with over 17,000 problems. You can set, tick climbs, make shareable playlists, watch send videos for motivation and beta, and even add your own videos to share with other users. Kilter has multiple wall sizes and package options available, so we can help get a Kilter board in almost any space. Check out Kilter at settercloset.com and look for more information in our show notes. This episode is brought to you by Osprey. Located just down the road from the Climbing Zine headquarters in Cortez, Colorado, Osprey is the leader in technical packs for technical pursuits. Osprey has an unwavering commitment to both conservation as well as sustainability. They are a pinnacle member of the Conservation Alliance, and 80% of their full-line product in spring 2025 are Blue Sign products. Also new for spring is the Transporter Liner duffels, built for hauling gear to the ends of the earth and back. Built with the lightest and most durable new NanoTough material made from 100% recycled materials. Visit your local retailer to find out more about Osprey or visit osprey.com. This episode is also sponsored by Scarpa. As many of our listeners know, I spent my last winter down in El Potrero Chico, Mexico. And this last winter, I was exclusively climbing in Scarpa shoes. The terrain of the limestone in Potrero is incredibly sharp, so it's a type of rock that really bites through the rubber on your shoes. And I was pleased to say that the 2 pairs of shoes that I used this winter totally held up and lasted me through the entire winter, and I'm still using them here back in Colorado in the springtime. I had the Instinct VSRs for a little more overhanging terrain or when I had to heel hook. And I used the Vapor lace-ups on more of the legendary, technical, small foothold type of terrain. Both of these shoes really lasted me well through the season. And if you'd like to get your own pair of Scarpas, check out scarpa.com. And we also have some affiliate links in our show notes that you can get a discount and score your own pair and support the Climbing Zine. Without further ado, let's get into this episode. I'm here with Andy Vo in El Potrero Chico, Mexico. Andy, how's it going, brother?
Another day in Potrero. A bad day in Potrero is better than a good day at work.
We met at the Climbers Festival in Lander many moons ago.
It's probably around 2020, maybe?
I think it was 21 because
21?
it was
Okay.
the first one after the pandemic.
Right. That's a good point.
I saw you there for several years, and the Climbers Festival is a big part of the Climbing Zine. It's a big part of the community. But we were just like hanging out together, and we never climbed. But you sent me a text this season when I was here. You were like, hey, look out for my buddy. Was it Kevin?
Kevin, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like, look out for my buddy Kevin. I'm like, okay, whatever, And I literally go to the crag before I could even text this guy. I go to the crag with Alexei, another partner here. Kevin was just there. And so it was really cool. Even with all this technology to connect people, sometimes you just get connected naturally.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I pride myself on being able to anticipate what type of personality my friends may or may not want in their life. And so you both have similarly positive energy, and you, to me, look at climbing similarly, even though we hadn't climbed yet, to your point. So I was like, I think Kevin should meet Luke here. So he might have been affected by the federal cuts. I shot him a call, but we didn't connect yet, so hope he's doing well.
I asked you when you're showing up, and I think I had just returned this early February. I went back to Colorado for about a month and came back, and I saw you. And we had a group of friends that I knew some other people in the group, and they came to say hi, and you just kind of kept walking. And I was like, oh, I think Andy would have said hi, but you were like, you said something was wrong with your eyesight or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't.
I'm going through, I'm trying to use up all my old contacts, like I'm a dirtbag style, right? So they are weaker in prescription than they should be. So seeing far away facial features is hard. So I just didn't recognize you.
No, totally. And I just sent you a text. I was like, hey, I think I saw you. I think you're here. Let's link up. I feel like here in Potrero, I have good friends come down, and then there's the people that are already here. But I feel like every season, if I'm lucky, I'll meet kind of like one or two partners that I know, like, oh, this is a partner for life. And I feel like over this last month of projecting together, we've kind of built that bond where I feel like, oh, I'll climb with Andy for the rest of my life. So
yeah, no, I share those sentiments, and it's nice to have a formal conversation, because many times you don't get to articulate these thoughts and feelings to your friends. And so I share the same joy and fulfillment in just sharing space with you. Vibes are good at the crag. It actually mirrors my impression of you prior to climbing together, which is no surprise, because I remember it was my first International Climbers Festival visit, and we were just visiting the tents. And so I got to check out your tent, and then somehow just ended up in the tent the entire day. And then you invited us over to dinner, me and my friends as well. And so I remember we had a lot more of a relationship building experience than a typical ICF visitor. So that's where, even though we haven't climbed together, I have an impression of how you would be at the crag.
speaking of being at the crag, this episode is really going to be centered around the art of belaying and belaytionship. We discussed it's not just going to be about belaying, but the thing that you said in our first day out climbing, we're at Club Max and we're just kind of doing the dance or whatever, getting ready. And you're like, I'm trying to be as good of a belayer as I am a climber. And that just kind of opened up the conversation. And at first I was just like, oh, that's a nice thing to say. But over the last month of projecting together, I think that I've realized too, my climbing these days is very, with partnerships, it used to be big walls and now it's projects. And each time we go out, I learn something kind of about being a good belayer, but it's not just about being a good belayer. It's about being a good human and being a good climber. But since that first session, you opened up this thing, which thanks for being willing to have a conversation about it in this format, because I've learned something every day, and then you've also made me think a lot about my own belaying. To go back further, what is your introduction to climbing in general? How did climbing alter the course of your life? Because you did say you started a little bit later than maybe the average climber. Take us back to where Andy gets kind of turned on to climbing.
I started climbing, I'd say about 11 years ago, in response to healing from a shoulder surgery. I've been playing in organized and individual sports much of my life, exceedingly avid snowboarder and tennis player, to the same degree of my enthusiasm and stoke for climbing to this day. So climbing isn't the first sport that I have been completely in love with. Now, for snowboarding, it's a costly endeavor. And so as a broke college student, we were sneaking into the resorts. Sometimes you get kicked out, sometimes you run away. But I thought, I need to get legitimate access somehow. So I became a snowboard instructor after I was a tennis instructor earlier in my life. So both of these sports allowed me to understand movement, psychology, and equally importantly, that different people learn differently. Some people learn by doing, some people learn by reading, watching, a hybrid approach. And so with that, I was able to transfer that over to climbing. But I have a crippling fear of heights, Luke, and it's affected me pretty extremely. And I'm very growth driven as an individual, so I thought it would be good to pursue addressing that. And so that meant that climbing was a good candidate because tennis is an individual sport. I've played other team sports, and climbing, you can have a lot of team vibes when you want. You can focus on yourself. And more importantly, you can work on building relationships with not just yourself, but with nature, with your body, with your mind. So I've been climbing aggressively for 11 years. I lived in New York. And then at that point, I realized that France and the world had destinations that you need to live at to get good volume. So I moved to London to climb there, and then more recently to Colorado, exploring Wyoming and obviously Mexico here. So yeah, I've climbed a lot, but more importantly, I have been able to overlay other professional and personal principles, self-development, and helping others into hopefully one day a masterclass in belaying.
This is a unique episode for us. I think the only episode I've ever done in this theme was Everybody Poops in Indian Creek with Tim Folks, which was like, for me, the Climbing Zine and the podcast is always trying to figure out unique aspects or conversations that can be had, because we're living in a world where there's so much information, especially right now. I think it's training. 25 years ago when I started, there wasn't a bit of information, and now there's a hyper focus on that. But I don't feel like belaying, or even the word belaytionship, to me, we've talked about this, is so interesting, because I always thought belaytionship was kind of this like cheeky, interesting word. But now I think about it more and it's like, wow, a belaytionship is like a relationship. You are literally trusting your life in someone's hands. What really made you focus on belaying as something that you want to be more intentional about increasing your skills and just opening up the conversation?
That's a good question. I think there are multiple threads to unravel here, and we'll start with them randomly, I suppose. So if we start with just the notion of a relationship, the interplay between two people, or in this sense, we also have a relationship to nature, to the crag, like how much should I comfortize this route, this shared use trail, or in the Flatirons, should this bolt be here at all, or should we spray paint it? So I would say that the relationship to yourself, your notions of identity as an individual, as a professional, whether it's as a X years old or gender, you have to consider the identity of yourself as a climber. Because if you ask another climber how important is climbing to them, identities are an onion, right? And is climbing at the core of what defines you? If you then shake that core, get an injury, for example, and you can't climb, are you nobody now? Is your identity shattered? So belaying, and this ties to my professional life as well, is that you don't judge a person based on an action. People make mistakes. They're human. They're not infallible. But you judge them over a series of actions, which determine what someone's behavioral traits are, which then determine their character. So people are afraid to attack. It's perceived as an attack, But many times the climber is simply trying to portray feedback on one action, the belay. But people don't receive feedback well in general in life. So then the relationship isn't getting strengthened then. It's deviating from one person, the belayer, versus the climber's understanding of who I am, especially when people come forward with binary statements like, I am a good belayer, or I'm the best belayer. Because you could be a good one today, and you could be a terrible one tomorrow. So relationships and belaytionships, as you term it, they are built upon the same principles of transparency, of understanding, of open communication, of do I feel safe in this relationship? Can I be vulnerable? Can I share feedback? Do I believe that you will take it well? So I get a little bit tangential there into the weeds of what defines a relationship, etc. But I think it's critical since many people don't have a firm understanding of where climbing fits into their identity yet.
Do you have a certain criteria that you look for with your climbing partners in a belay?
I would have loved to map this out over time, my criteria.
You're like, this could be a whole season. This could be a whole podcast. Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a heavy intersectionality or a Venn diagram between the climbing, the belaying, the relationships to yourself, to the people, to nature. And I'll touch upon it in a bit, but people have varying default modes of considering their mindsets being more fixed or growth, right? If you look at the pros in really any sport, they have a voracious growth mindset. They're able to take feedback from anyone, even though they're already the best. They know they can be better. It's not an external comparison or validation, which climbing can become, as you know, but it's like, am I the best that I can be? And focusing on internal metrics that you're in control of. Am I trying my hardest? Am I showing up? We know that showing up's a big one. Am I blaming external factors? Many times you hear people complain about, I would have sent if I didn't get short roped. But I have a bit of a harsh take on that, which is if 1 second of unmanageable slack is preventing you from sending, then just get stronger. Don't blame external factors. That being said, so over time, I've changed my criteria on what's an acceptable belay partner. One thing is, do I want to be goal-oriented or process-oriented? Is it more important to send, or is it more important to get better at climbing? Or in this case, to have a good time. Like, we're having a great time there, regardless of the outcome of our climbs, of the conditions. And so that's more of a process than like a goal of, you're taking up too much time, it's my turn to red point. Or the relationship, as you can put it, is now becoming adversarial. We're consuming from each other rather than building. And that's a pillar of strong relationships, and a pillar of mental health is that you make sure you generate things proportionately to what you take from the world. And this includes belaying as well, in my opinion. So my criteria used to be too strict, too tight. I would demand only the best skilled belayers. And over time, I sought to improve this by only having high skilled belayers. But that removes a shockingly large percentage of the climbing partners that you have. And so a buddy of mine who is a climbing coach in London, he was helping me reframe by just inadvertently asking me, what am I afraid of?
He noticed this about you, that you were being too rigid, or?
We were talking. As he's a coach, I try not to talk about it too much with him, but just in natural conversation, we comment about the lack of quality belaying where we were. And his point was, he asked me, how many times have you been injured due to a belay or sprained an ankle, or how much do you witness it? Because I was so focused on it. And it helped me understand that there are many things in my control, back to my point about external validation or standards versus internal. There's many things that I am directly in control of or could contribute, such as the communication with my partner. They're not watching. I might say, hey, Luke, watch me here, please. I'm scared, or I might fall. I can certainly modify what I climb. I only climb moderates with this person because they're a lower skill belayer. They're newer. I only share the crag with this person in groups because they have a certain energy that they can't take feedback unless it's from multiple people, etc. So these criteria changed over time to fit human nature rather than trying to elevate everyone to this unreasonable standard at the time. Now, I'll close this question by pointing out that climbing throughout history has had, well, obviously contemporary history, has had varying charts to demonstrate what skill level you are as a climber. Belaying can, and I believe should have that someday. We're at a place where climbing is in the Olympics, and yet the sacred and very important notion of belaying, whether it's the technical element or the psychological element, has no standardization for which people can then draw and provide constructive, compassionate feedback to their partner.
Do you think your fear of heights contributes to this?
That was the seed of it, I would say, Luke. You're right. That went unspoken, but thank you for drawing that out, is that because I was so scared, I was seeking to mitigate ambiguity anywhere I could. If you know that your belayer is always paying attention, that's certainly better than not, right? But you shouldn't be reliant on it because, as I mentioned, I can call out to them, hey, please don't chat right now. There's loose rocks here. Or, hey, there's a ledge coming up ahead. Please watch me there. But I certainly don't expect them to be attentive 100% of the time. A quick segue to kind of circle back to your question. How do I choose my partners? I make sure that they have, and this is under the premise that this is a lifetime partner, one I can trust across scenarios, is that they understand what are the principles of good, skilled, quality lead belaying. And generally, it's going to be, any coach will provide feedback based on one of three categories. It's going to be anticipation, things that I can predict by observing. For example, I see that your legs are shaking. It's probably a good time for me to have my head on a swivel, have my legs bent, manage the slack, and watch out for where you're going to fall potentially, right? So it's the anticipation. Now you have reaction, the ability to automatically respond to stimuli. So if a rock drops on me, am I going to release my hand of the brake strand? If you fall unexpectedly, am I going to just instinctively take hard? That's a common trait many people have, but it's not ideal. Like, we don't want a hard take when we fall accidentally, right? But it's human behavior, right? And the last one is mobility, is the ability to move around. And that might include giving a dynamic catch by jumping aggressively, or just gently standing up, or standing away far from the wall to introduce more friction into the system at the first bolt. So you have reaction, anticipation, and mobility as the three core tenets. I like to think of a fourth, which is, call it mentality. It's like, how well do you know your partner? Do you know when to say, what to say, how to say it? Sometimes saying something is worse than not saying it. So a common question that should be introduced at the beginning of every climbing partnership is, how do you feel about encouragement? Because then you get to set boundaries around, if I'm scared, can you please encourage me? Or if I'm scared, please don't say anything. I need to be super focused. But we all want what's best for our fellow climbers, and so it's natural for the whole crag to be yelling. But regardless, I think that I have very low standards in a climbing partner right now in the best way possible, meaning that I prioritize other relationships with them interpersonally, and I will work around the skills present.
You made me think about a couple of things. One, you made me think about, for me, the belayer, partner, whatever, with the project, I wanted to be able to talk about things that are other than climbing too.
That's a great point.
Like projects, like I love communal project climbing, or like shared projects. Like we're trying the same climb. We've been trying it for 3+ weeks. We're very much at a similar point of progression. I'm spending so much time with you, I've got to have interesting conversations that are not just about climbing. That's something I didn't really expect to think about, but that's so important for me for a belaytionship, is that we're not just always focused on climbing.
Yeah, that brings to mind a story. I'll randomize names here, but you bring up a perfect example of, we call it professionally, the airport test. And if we're interviewing for an open position that you will work with, certainly we will want to assess on aptitude and skills, knowledge, cultural fit, the four main criteria. But the best candidate will be someone you enjoy spending time with. And so if you only judge on merit alone, you won't be able to have the best partnership. And that's a relationship too, right? And so this reminds me of a quote I heard early on in my climbing career in a film about base jumping, actually, wingsuit diving.
Oh, right. Okay. You re-triggered the memory. Yes, I know who you're talking about. I met this guy hiking up one day at Castleton. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know him, but I feel that I know him deeper because he said some things that resonated quite well with me from the beginning of my climbing career to now, is that what he considers the best climbing partner, belaytionship, however you term it, is that a common downfall is when a partner believes that their job is to contribute towards a shared goal, such as ascend of a climb. But in his opinion, the best partner is one who is able to bring out the best in their partner. And we see that time and time again when someone shows gratitude for someone saying the right thing at the right time. They were scared, they got encouraged, didn't feel safe, they were reassured of the objective hazard not existing. And so that's how I have always approached climbing partnerships and relationships. And so the airport test is very valid to me in finding climbing partners today. That's where I am now, is that I don't want to say, oh, I can't climb with you because you don't have XYZ criteria. It's more about, I want to hang out with you. We'll take our gear for a walk. We may climb. But ultimately, I recognize that in my climbing partner relationship, I don't want a transactional element solely. Mm-hmm. So the story I have to recount on an example of this recently is my friend is, let's call him Bill, is a high skill and experience developer, and fostered a relationship with a visiting climber, a pro. And so the climbing partnership that ensued relatively quickly soured for Bill, because it became evident that the pro wanted solely a transactional element of, take me to unclimbed projects. I want to be prominent in this area. I want to climb it all. I am not interested in who you are at all. He didn't say that outright, but it was implicit in the way he didn't ask my friend about a single thing in his personal life, and would get very upset if my friend said he wanted to go develop something and couldn't belay the other person. So we get to decide how important it is for us to value traits of interpersonal relationships in a climbing partnership versus there's a place and time for transactional. I'm not saying this is a value-based judgment. I'm saying it's not right for me. It fits other people, and it's fit me at times in specific scenarios, but how I decide my climbing partners now is significantly more holistic than in the past.
Mm-hmm. And that's why belaytionship is a good word. As much as this is a conversation about belaying, it's a conversation about partners and partnership and relationships and sharing time with people, you know? Yeah.
That's right. And I think some core tenets of what we would loosely say is a good climbing partnership relationship, there needs to exist trust, right? There needs to exist strong communication. We need to be able to say things that we're thinking without feeling judged. So we need to feel safe. I need to feel supported by my partner. A common concern people say is, I'm taking too long on the route. but don't worry, I got you, you know? So when you feel that, you just feel taken care of. Your concerns are left on the ground. Your time is your time on the rock. And certainly a shared experience, I think, is the most beautiful thing. Climbing has yielded me innumerable experiences that I value the most in life, and they're generally secondary to climbing. It's like being in beautiful places, serendipity of meeting people, seeing gorgeous things. But don't get me wrong, sending is cool as well. I do love to send, I must say.
Something I've written about in the Climbing Zine, I wrote about being in Potrero. Sometimes I have anxiety over partners when I'm here by myself, because I'm okay with a day or two of the transactional. But if I'm going to really dive into a project, and this season's really made me realize that projects for me are also relationship based. I don't want to just go do a project and have someone belay me from my end. I want that mutual interest in it. And the way I wrote this out is that even though I'm a known figure in the climbing community, even though a lot of random people are like, hey, Luke, I still have that anxiety that I won't find that right person. And the thing I love about Potrero is, although I have had a couple experiences where I've climbed with people, I'm like, I'm not going to climb with them again, or more accurately, people that are nearby. There's accidents here at kind of a high level. Statistically, I would imagine there's more accidents here than rifle or something, you know?
Certainly, yeah.
So you're making me think about why I've had that anxiety, but now I'm also thinking in 25 years of climbing, I've had some close calls, and I've also had my life saved and my belayer's life saved in one instance by an auto-locking device.
Wow.
So I have this feeling of where I really don't want anyone to ever belay me with an ATC unless it's one of those that automatically locks. So the situation that happened to me where it was my good friend Tim Folks again, we're climbing in Indian Creek, and this is the ending of my book, The Desert. So if you don't want the spoiler alert of what happens, you can fast forward through this, but the book's been out for about 7 years, so if you haven't read it by now. But anyways, I was doing a first ascent, and I was coming up on a loose block, or a big block, and I told my belayer, Tim, it's like, hey, Tim, can you move over into that chimney so if this block comes down, it's not going to take you out. Tim proceeded to do that, and while he was moving, the block he stepped on moved, and it was so big, it flipped him upside down and then landed on him.
Wow.
It was crazy, dude. So he basically took a simul-climbing fall on me, but I had a number 2 right above me. So I barely felt the fall. It wasn't a gree-gree, but it was one of those, I think it was an Edelrid device that automatically locks, like the Mega Jewel or something like that. Right. And so we, you know, Tim's a long time climbing partner. I didn't fault him. If anything, it was like my fault that we didn't set this belay switch up beforehand because we knew the block was there. But anyways, that saved not only his life, but potentially my life. Ever since then, I have been insistent on an auto-locking device.
That's quite reasonable. Do you not find that to be a reasonable boundary to set?
I do, and honestly, this season in Potrero has made it feel even more reasonable because I saw someone, and we're not going to say names here again, but I did see someone get dropped 70 feet almost to the ground with an ATC. How do you handle something like that? And maybe we can kind of go into an example that we just saw recently when we're climbing on our project with our friend Chris. You can say his name because it's a totally reasonable like thing. He put me on belay with an ATC. And I was like, hey, do you mind using a gree-gree? And I think sometimes that could be, some people could be like, no, I'm such a good belayer with the ATC. But Chris didn't say a word. He's like, of course, I'll belay you with the gree-gree if you feel more comfortable. I think it was like Chris's first time belaying me too.
Oh, wow. I remember the interaction. You know, these are valuable insights into how people provide feedback, set boundaries, receive feedback, and then how they move forward. I thought that you approached it in a very diplomatic way, especially given it was your first time climbing together, and you were not questioning his skills, right? You just were simply asking that your preferences be requested of usage of a specific device. Now, I did ask Chris why, et cetera, and just academically, but Chris understood. He has high emotional intelligence and didn't take it as an attack on his skills or his character. So that's a very mature way to go about it. But I would say that there are often conflicting or adversarial interactions where people will get defensive and say, I've been belaying for 20 years, never dropped a single person. It's not about you. It's about respecting that your position as belayer is to make your climber feel as safe and comfortable as possible. So you're already getting off on the wrong foot when you get into this discussion, borderline argument of like trying to tell them, that's great that you can do that, but if we want to climb together, is there a mutual respect and trust? This is an element of that conflicting, because that's just a fallacy to say you've been doing this for 20 years, right? And so you're an expert, you got to keep with the times. When there are objective hazards increase, like in Potrero, falling rocks, we single pitch below multi-pitch, people drop radios and gree-grees, etc. And so, no, I think it's a reasonable request, and I thought it was a good example of what I would hope to see people express openly to their partners, whether it's a weight difference or, as you mentioned, the belay device, or not wearing a helmet even, which is a more common topic nowadays.
Yeah, especially here. I mean, that could be a whole nother episode too. It's just like helmet usage. You know, and it's interesting. The season before this, I had an experience with someone who the experience, and I won't say this person's name, it went the opposite. So the person had an ATC. It was a top rope belay, and I was like, can you just belay me with a gree-gree? And he said no. He's like, I've belayed at competitions with ATCs. Right. He took it as a personal attack. I was like, whatever, it's just a top rope lap. And then halfway up the route, he joked about dropping me. Like, I'd never climbed with this person. He made that joke, you know, like, oh, I'm going to drop you, or just like really, really off color kind of like joke that maybe it just didn't land well with me. And I'm still friends with the person, but I never tied in again, nor will I ever tie in again with this person.
That's interesting, because many interpersonal relationships are affected by that partnership, for positive or negative. I like to say that belaytionships accelerate the interpersonal relationship, and it allows you to see degrees of trust, communication, vulnerability, respect. If someone can show underlying character traits here, then it tells me, do I want to spend time with this person in general? And it might be, wow, I want to spend more time with this person. Or it could be, all right, well, we had a good day today, we'll go our separate ways. We just don't fit each other. Again, no value judgment. This is about risk management mindset, and I respect theirs, regardless of whether or not I believe it's flawed.
Something else, and I'm trying just going to give personal examples. I think weight difference is a big, big thing within my personal relationships, and then going into romantic relationships too. I weighed 150 steadily up until I hit 40. And then once I hit 40, I gained 25 to 30 pounds. And I'm stronger than I was physically when I was 40, but I have this weight. And going from being a 180 to, the last person I dated was probably around 100 pounds. So huge, huge difference. I think the Ohm device or general devices like it have been great to help out the lighter belayer to not take as much of a weight. That device in particular, the Ohm, especially the new one, it's a lot easier to clip than the first one. That has just made me feel a lot more comfortable, because I think if I'm 180 and a 100-pound person is belaying me, I almost look at it like I don't fall. Right. Unless I have the device, and so I feel more comfortable.
Why don't you fall? Is it because of the impact on the belayer, or your fall will be less controlled? What exactly are you looking to avoid?
Both of those things, okay. Yeah. Like if I know I'm going to pull this climber up a lot,
right.
And this is not using the Ohm device,
sure,
I'll feel like that guiding free solo kind of mentality.
Right.
But now that I have the Ohm device, I feel more comfortable with a lighter person belaying me, because it totally takes the majority of the fall off that person.
Sure.
But then the inverse of giving too hard of a catch too can be an issue with the lighter person, you know? What are your general thoughts on how weight differences. And then that also goes into a lot of its romantic. We can kind of talk about these two separately, but because I do feel like the romantic relationships go into belaytionships heavily, and then you're bringing a lot of things into it. But any thoughts just in general about climbers that are different weight and ways to balance that out?
So specifically with weight difference, from a framework of the technical, the science side of it, there is a best practice percentage difference. I haven't really heard a specific number by the AMGA, but I'd be curious if there is. But I've heard numbers from manufacturers, et cetera, to keep, because I know I enjoy experimenting with belaying. And so what percentage weight difference can my partner be heavier than me before I effectively lose all control during a take or a fall? And I weigh about 160, 65 probably right now. There are climbers where I struggle to stay still when taking them. So they're dragging me towards the wall. So imagine if that's a static load. Imagine if you take a dynamic element, like I will lose all control and just ricochet into the first point of protection. And so I think maybe Neely Quinn or someone in the gym had their foot, the bone broken, I believe, from a hard cut. You just cannot control or run up the wall or soften your knees adequately. So there's a degree of objective hazard and safety there.
And that's from a hard catch, basically?
Oh, no, that's from a much heavier belayer or heavier climber falling with a very light belayer.
Light belayer and no ohm or...
No ohm.
What, I guess,
you could wear a backpack as well, I suppose. I don't see it done that often, but people do wear weighted backpacks, obviously with the gear they bring, to offset the weight as well. In the gym, you can clip the first bolt of the neighboring climb, and that introduces friction into the system as well. But that's not done commonly because you're taking up two routes usually. There's other ways to do this, but at the end of the day, you have to treat the scenario with the likelihood of the outcome, like the risk in essence. And to your point, you treat it as a no-fall zone if you climb with XYZ weight difference in partners. So that goes to say that you should certainly use an assisted braking device there. I've been ripped up into the first bolt, not many times, but I know to not put my non-braking hand above the device. I've seen people get it caught and injured there, but that's where it's important for the belayer, if they're much lighter, to fully understand the implications of the belay. The risk might be low, but the outcome would be potentially, I don't want to use catastrophic, but it could be. Now you have that consideration in a multi-pitch setting as well, and then it becomes actually dangerous for the belayer to get ripped into the anchor with such minimal slack in the system from the belay device to the first piece. And so not everyone knows or uses the process of the belayer lowering another 7-8 feet, say on a clove on the climbing rope, so that if the climber does fall, the system has more elasticity in it and more distance to the first piece for the belayer. It has a lot of implications, but because it doesn't happen often, I would believe that it isn't focused on yet.
Talking about relationships, some people joke that it's funny to see a couple fighting on the wall. I think I'm guilty of saying that. When you really break it down, as much as it is funny to the observer, like if you're in that moment and you're having a meltdown or a wobbler with your partner, it feels terrible for both people.
There's a relatability in it.
We've all had a fight with the significant other, yeah. We know where they're at. I'm glad it's not me, yeah.
Oh, I agree with that. Because especially if one person is providing good feedback to the other and they're dismissive of it because they have another layer of relationship that's closer to the core of their identity as a romantic partner, rather than like listening to an external coach with no bias, etc. But it is a sacred relationship that people take with a huge variance of seriousness currently still.
You were like a belayer therapist at one point with a couple.
I'll start by saying that the tenets of Just like there's 3 principles or categories of good lead belaying, there's going to be similarly objective categories of good climbing, right? They include strength, technique, mentality, and when you get to a higher level, tactics. So the psychology or the mentality element encompasses the relationships we have with our own identities, with our partner, the relationships we have with climbing. If I'm a goal-oriented person, and let's say I reach my goal grade of, let's say, 511A, arbitrary grade, if I'm a fixed mindset oriented person, I now identify as that. I'm a 511A climber. And so if I don't do well on a 511A, it puts my understanding of myself in jeopardy. I'm like, I thought I climbed 511A, and that can easily be projected onto your partner. And so romantic partners know each other much more intimately. The emotional intimacy of being able to be vulnerable or feel safe is there. So there's a much larger range of emotions, understandings, communications that occur that might conflict with why you're there, which is technically to belay each other, right? And so notions of trust and communication. And that's why I mentioned I see belaying as a relationship accelerator. It allows you to see flaws or areas of improvement in yourself, in your partner, and in yourself as a whatever relationship it may be. And it might be romantic. So the first tenet, one of, is to make sure your partner feels safe and able to be vulnerable. So if I can provide that as a belay partner, but their romantic partner in that scenario believed from a fixed mindset that they're a good belayer, don't need any feedback, especially not from you, my romantic partner, then the partner over time is feeling silenced and marginalized and cannot feel vulnerable to share in that relationship, in the belaytionship, because the romantic relationship principles are not being applied as well outside here. So if they can come to me, I can then combine the understanding of good lead belaying from a technical standpoint, good climbing, good partnership, and point it out in a more impartial and ideally, like I said, holistic way, not just looking at it from a technical standpoint, but hey, let's make them feel safe. It might be an irrational expectation, but it's their expectation. And if you can live with that as a partner, then you need to remember that you want to respect your partner's boundaries, preferences, avoidances. I was just outside of the situation as I see it. They had not been able to articulate those elements, anticipation, reaction, mobility. And so then it was just coming across as the partner was hearing, you're not a good belayer. Does that mean you're not a good romantic partner? No. Does that action dictate you as a person? No. But that's what the other person was hearing. So there was a breakdown there. So it's about how to resolve a conflict. Again, pulling from my professional life, just bringing to bear in a climbing setting.
And you were able to kind of be that person that made a bit of a difference for understanding, you think?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there was quite a happy ending there because I simply was able to reframe and highlight that heavier climbers relative to their partner need to be higher skill belayers. They need to be. A lighter climber has so much more of a buffer in giving a hard catch because they can resist all they want. The kilonewtons on the fall will exceed what they exert from a static standpoint. Whereas like if I am belaying a 100-pound climber and I don't pay attention, it's going to feel like falling on a static rope because I won't move as much. So we need to remember that our role is to make our partner feel safe. And so that means that I'm not chatting with other people. If I don't use belay glasses, I'm using belay glasses because the consequences of a normal fall are much higher for the lighter climber than for the heavier climber. And so my friend, I was good friends with both of them, just hadn't fully recognized that on top of feeling a bit attacked because he was a very high skill climber. And so we conflate high skill climber with high skill belayer, but he's a sharp person and has good emotional intelligence. So he was able to see that that was not equivocal. Good climbing is not good belaying, which you hear a lot of people say, right? They're like, oh, don't worry, I'm a really good climber. It's as if that would make them a good belayer.
I lost a friendship basically over belaying, or it was the killer of the friendship. And it was an extremely skilled climber, but just had two situations. One situation was I was climbing at our local choss pile, the golf wall. I was halfway up the route, and the routes are 50 feet long. They're very, very short. It's like a beloved and also talk smack about crag around Durango. It's like a tiny little chunk of rifle, like a 35 route, 50, 60 foot chunk of rifle. The person switched my belay off in the middle of a short route and didn't tell me.
Wow.
And I was furious about it. The other person I had never climbed with either. It was like a new person to our group. And I was freaking furious when I got to the top. And I left the crag. I don't think I've ever left the crag in anger. And so that was like strike one. And me and this person had also just kind of butted heads as friends as well. And then the second, honestly, it was the same route. And I was 3 bolts up, and it was like an icy cold day. And I was on this tiny little ledge, and I looked down, and my belayer had loops of rope on the ground like it was like they were belaying on some 200-foot mega thing, given a super soft catch. And I just looked down that day, and I was like, this is the final straw with me with this person.
A quick clarifying question on that, Luke. I'm not clear. So in the first scenario, you were taken off belay mid-route. But when you say that, was there redundancy? Was someone below the device?
Yeah. It was never a risk. It was the belaytionship of, one, this is a route that takes 5 minutes to climb. And so the person was like eager to get ready for their next route. It was just being silly. So that's what happened in the first thing. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And I have just trauma in general around climbing of accidents I've witnessed, personal experiences with either getting dropped or, there's a lot going into this. But I felt like the switching of the belay on a 7-bolt 50-foot route to someone I don't know, and not even to tell me.
And were you able to communicate that immediately?
I kind of have a temper, so sometimes I just get so mad I got to walk away. I stormed off, left the crag. This person called me. We talked about it. I was like, okay, we can work past this. Like the fool me once, And
I see.
The second situation, I was just like, not only are you a bad belayer, it doesn't seem like you care about my existence on the wall,
Sure. And that's an element of belaying, right? Is mutual support and trust of your partner. So I immediately leapt to instinctively objective safety first. Like, were you in danger? But we should recognize, and I did not mean to imply that that's number one, because the element of trust includes, will you respect my wishes, my boundaries, etc.? And so you gave it another chance. You talked through it, but it occurred again. So you just weren't right for each other. Like they're a maverick. It's a harsh word, but it comes down to selfishness, literally. How self-centered do I want this partnership to be? And so you see at the crag when people want to snake the route because they're projecting.
You're talking about when people don't say hi. So there's someone on a route and you want to get on it. And they just say, how long are you going to be on this? Without saying hi.
It's an informal snake because many people are taken aback and they just give up the route, especially if the person is, let's call it higher skill in influence. And they're like, oh, I'm red pointing. I won't take long. They're making it hard to say no. I think that's at best poor etiquette in terms of my climbing values of prioritizing the interpersonal relationships rather than the sends, if you will, there. I call it a light snake, I suppose.
Something I love about Mexican culture is even when people are saying, hi, how are you? Hola, buenos dias, whatever. And I feel like that carries over to the crag. A lot of times when I see Mexican climbers rolling up, they're always like, hey, how's it going? And sometimes gringos kind of roll up and just like, hey, there's no hi.
Right.
It's like, hi, how are you? Is always a good point to start with any life engagement. And then especially at the crag, it's like, if someone's on a route you want to get on, say hi. But maybe they also have that intention of, I want to get on this. What's my technique to, like you said, gaslight or whatever, but like
Sure.
maybe they're not even trying to be friendly.
Great point.
Which I don't even think about that because I feel like I'm a just Midwest nice kind of person, Like,
yeah, and it comes back down to managing expectations then and articulating what you want. Because in my example of that pro and my friend, I think I made up the name Bill, he was being slowly gaslit. The impressions of an interpersonal relationship, but ultimately it wasn't. It was just a transactional usage, right? As you mentioned here, the culture is a bit different than American climbing. And I think you and Tim touched upon it in your chat, in that I would articulate it in a way that goes back to what we've been talking about layers of relationships. So if you go back to the crag and you meet, the first interaction defines your identity by the other person. Is it, hi, I'm Luke, generating a new relationship interpersonally, nice day, huh? Awesome, whatever, versus, hey, how long will you be? What's the line like? Yeah. Now your identity is that of an adversary. We both want this route. I don't even know your name, so it makes it even more impersonal. And so building the right sequence of layers relationship is important, in that, hey, you're a person, I'm a person, hey, we're out in nature enjoying it together, versus take, a consumption of resources rather than a generative drive. A lot of this is pulled just from best practices and studies of mental health even. So it's quite funny how it automatically applies to relationships, one of the most sacred relationships you can have. The stakes, accidents, death, or loss of relationships at best.
Your life is literally in someone else's hands every time.
Yeah. I want to circle back briefly to something you mentioned about your interactions with, I don't think you named that individual, but where they had taken you off belay, and then the second, and then it ended a relationship. I think that how we address interpersonal conflict as adults is generally suboptimal at best. If you just look at the larger community, the ability to provide feedback in an uncomfortable situation that's compassionate, comes with empathy, it comes from a place of understanding rather than to try to correct something, looking down upon them or calling them out for doing something wrong, is important. And so a lot of times I see people just won't say anything. Might cause a stir, or they might have a belief that it's too far gone. That's just who they are. But in performance management science, we always remember that what you tolerate becomes accepted. If you have a staff member who comes in late 10 minutes and you don't say anything, you're like, oh, it's only 10 minutes. They are going to have an impression in their head that, oh, I didn't get called out on that. It should be okay to do. So communicating boundaries, expectations, and being able to do so safely and feel vulnerable is important. And we see that commonly superseded by other notions of privilege, for example. Like, as men, we occupy a different space in the community than women. And so even to this day, I always forget, but it's very obvious that it still occurs, that someone will ask for beta to a group of climbers, and then they'll just look at the men first rather than the woman, right? Or if a woman asks for beta, there's going to be a bunch of shirtless guys around shouting what to do, very instructive rather than collaborative. And so we don't come from a place that is as marginalized, but being able to feel vulnerable and safe and not get talked down to occurs from interaction one when you meet someone. So I get it if sometimes you walk up to a crag and there is minimal interaction, etc. You have a finite time to be there. How do you want to spend your effort and time is generally selfish. It's on myself. So in summary, I would point out that we want to remember that everyone's there to have a good time. I hope, that's why. And that we as a whole are generally going to be much better than the sum of our parts. We're going to build new relationships. You never met Kevin. I thought it might work well. We're in essence building the community up rather than trying to make silos or get the send first before someone, or, oh, they're taking up too much of my time. I get it. Everyone's light on time, but we should try to remember that it's a we, right? It's not I in climbing. Until robot belayers exist, I need my belayer to be a good partner.
Robot belayers, wow. I knew this hour would go fast, and maybe we will do a series at some point, or maybe you'll do a series, or any of the above. Just on a personal note, I just want to say that a couple things I've heard you note the importance of like fairness and integrity, and I feel like a month of trying this route Viento de Primavera, that's hopefully going to go down for both of us this week.
What a great route.
Amazing route. Yeah, shout out to Felipe Garcia who got the FA.
Woo-woo.
You've shown me integrity and fairness as a belayer. So I just wanted to intentionally say that because it's been a joy to climb with you, and I feel like I'll climb with you for the rest of my life, and great partner. And
I appreciate
you
that.
have practiced everything you're saying in this podcast. You're not just saying it because you're a smart person. Like, it feels like it's coming from the heart, and hopefully the people that are listening will get a little something out of this meandering conversation about belaying and belaytionships, which is really just about partnerships and how we interact with our fellow human beings. So
I appreciate that. I'd say that, again, I mirror much of the joy we have found together there in climbing. The conversations are countless over time with partners, and I know there's a huge demand for more content on this topic. I hope to speak with you more on it, or to have a spin-off, what have you. But ultimately, I would say that in climbing, I have values that I stick to every session. They're my compass, and I don't know if I've shared them with you. But as long as I can pursue and do my best in these values, it will create a good environment, a good time. And even if it doesn't, I know that I'm just showing up. It's reps. And they're sort of tongue-in-cheek, but each session, gym, bouldering, indoor, outdoor, on-siting, projecting, I want to make sure that my 3 values I'm pursuing, and it's have fun, try hard, and don't get injured worse than you were when you came in. So there's many ways to have fun, right? While climbing, hanging at the crag. I can try hard mentally. I can try hard emotionally, physically, And certainly as climbers, you quite well know that we don't take the time off we need. So we've got to remember that we're here to climb, and we shouldn't use something to excess and snap a pulley or what have you. So that's how I try to keep going in the same direction, are those values.
You are the most prepared guest I've ever had with your 12 pages of notes. I'm sure there's something in my notes that I didn't get to, but was there anything just in general that I didn't get to that you want to kind of share here at the end?
My parting thoughts would be to remind myself and everyone that, let's say we do what I mentioned I do. We apply the same rigor, intention, effort to belaying that we do climbing. In climbing and in any high-level sport, high performers never get bored with the fundamentals, the basics. If you use your presence and mindfulness to apply that to every belay, you'll find there's a limitless amount of things to work on in the technical side, in the relationship with your partner, the relationship to yourself. And blending confidence with humility allows you to remember that you have room to grow, that you can be coached. I want to say that I'm not coming from a place of mastery. I still struggle with anything from the technical side, because if you don't get to practice, it can wear away. Say the mental health side. What I do have now is a very heightened sense of awareness. Before, I, like many people, had become wrapped up in external measures of validation as a climber. Even on this trip, announce that you're projecting, people always want to know the outcome. Did you send? It's not, did you have fun? Did you send? Which then leads to comparison externally. So I derive joy and fulfillment from chasing my climbing values. I would say that the best partner is one who helps me be the best version of myself. And so, enjoyed our chat. Looking forward to climbing with you more, Luke.
It's the end of Potrero season in general is pretty quiet here, but the thing I do love about this place is that there is validation from what you climb, but I feel like in general, there aren't 14Ds here. There aren't really anything at a high level in the grand scheme of things. And that's what I love about this place is we're all just kind of being joyful in our relative mediocrity.
Here for the hangs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Right on, brother. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
That was my conversation with Andy Vo, the Art of the Belaytionship. I just had a blast having that conversation with Andy, and I think we could probably turn that into a series of podcasts, or he could even turn that into his own podcast. But thanks for listening. Hopefully you got something out of that as much as I did with having this conversation with Andy. And we are also in the middle of a new campaign called Sell Out the Zine. And this is a campaign to sell out all of our copies of the current issue, Volume 25, before we print Volume 26. We're actually moving towards a different format of the zine this year with a bigger issue. But for now, we are trying to sell out Volume 25. Subscribers, you can check in on your subscription at luke@climbingzine.com if you're unsure, and then you can subscribe at shop.climbingzine.com. And we have two different options, the annual subscription and then the deluxe annual subscription. And the deluxe comes with shirts, books, and stickers, so kind of a way to get hooked up a lot annually. Music for this episode and this season is by Devin Dabney. Our digital editor and producer is Chad Rich. And signing off, I'm Luke Mihal. Peace.